The legal debate over marijuana use has been a polarizing topic that has recently seen a shift. Marijuana may be one of the truly bipartisan issues in the United States right now, but with only 15 states that have legalized marijuana for adult recreational use and a total of 36 states permitting medical use of the drug, it is still a topic that has not been federally seen as holistic. With that in mind, listener discretion is advised.
So IZZ, there is a lot of talk lately about marijuana and cannabis. What's up with that?
Yeah, just if you look at, you're right. If you look at just in 2020, the 2020 election, voters in New Jersey and Arizona chose to legalize marijuana for adult recreational use. And Mississippi voted to legalize medical marijuana use with that Initiative 65 vote that many people thought would never happen in Mississippi. And South Dakota legalized the drug for both recreational and medical use just in the 2020 election.
Interesting. So that's a lot of traction on that. Well,
yeah.
I know Georgia, typically in the South, they're a lot more conservative, but even here, there's bills up for discussion and debate, and we'll get a little more into that. But where do you see this thing going in the next, I would say, 2 to 5 years? What are your thoughts?
Well, nationally, the Democrats just controlled the House, and now the Democratic-controlled House has just passed the MORE Act, and that's the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, which would legalize marijuana at the federal level and actually have sweeping regulations being implemented and reforms surrounding drugs. So that would even look at offenders as far as jailing, policing. It would really do a thing nationally with that.
Okay.
Recently introduced MORE Act, that would be a game changer. But just specifically in Georgia alone, we have seen a lot of things going on. Georgia has been in this game on the medical side of cannabis for about 5 years now. People are looking at it or talking about it now, but this thing has been around 5 years on a state level, but really it's been a topic for probably the last 8 years.
Yeah.
With only just being, around 2017 is when it came to be about everybody.
Topic of conversation, yeah.
Everybody, on everybody's tongue. But now looking at it from this standpoint, I just have to say this. We talk about the two sides, the adult use or what they call recreational use. Now they're using the term adult use markets and the medical or emerging medical use. And you have to understand that while we've had mature medical markets like Puerto Rico, even though Puerto Rico is not a state, with it being, people wanted it to be the 51st state. You've had Puerto Rico and Hawaii have had medical markets that launched before 2017. But as we look at the next 5 years, not even 5 years, but if we look at just by 2025, there will be 20 new medical markets adding about what we consider about 2.2, that's $2.2 billion in spending. And of those top states, Georgia is in the top 3, along with Texas and Missouri. So, but there's a lot of legal ramifications. There's a lot of things that will have to be handled. A lot of people are trying to get in there and trying to buy on one of those seats at the table.
Yeah.
But there's something that I think that maybe somebody more experienced, like we should really talk with someone on the political side of it, because that is where a lot of the firepower will come from, was legally what happens in Georgia.
Right. Well, we have someone just like that. It just so happens we have a state representative who's also an attorney that is involved in the current legislation. So,
wait a minute, an attorney and a state representative. So someone who knows from a legal and a political, which is very different, but knows both from a legal standpoint and a political standpoint.
Yep, she knows them both. So, without further...
And she is okay. Black Girl Magic for February the 13th that was just came about. Black Girl Magic.
Yes.
Who is this BGM?
State Representative Dar'shun Kendrick. So let's jump into her story. Welcome to another edition of the 30-Minute Podcast, full topics in half an hour for the intellectually curious. I'm Mariposa.
The IZZ.
And so, ICC, we have a very interesting topic today.
So I want to, first of all, go ahead and no, I'm not going to be, I want you to, don't you want the pleasure?
Actually, she does an excellent job as a spokesperson.
But no, because of who she is, they always have someone to introduce them to the audience. So to our 30 listeners global, worldwide, and specifically to our Georgia citizens, let me introduce you all to Representative, I think from Lithonia. I want to be honest with that, but representing the good citizens of Gwinnett and DeKalb, Representative Dar'shun Kendrick.
Woo! Thank you so much. I love that introduction.
Yes, that was very spirited. You did an excellent job.
She knows, isn't that what you're used to, Representative Kendrick?
Hey, I am just here to serve. Whatever works.
Such a
politician.
I wasn't going to say it, but you trying to get another couple years in with that one.
She just was reelected. So, hey, congratulations on your reelection. This is your what term?
I'm going into my 6th term.
Awesome.
And with that being said, I would like to always say that the 30-Minute Podcast is a nonpartisan platform, and we always welcome any and all, no matter what your political views are, your spiritual and religious views. We welcome all. This is what we call a DICE. We're very diverse, inclusive. I don't want to give the C away because I do that with corporate. I don't want people to start trying to steal my register.
No, let's see.
They'll get it. And if you don't, you won't. Go ahead. How you doing today? Can I call you Dar'shun? I Representative Kendrick. Can I?
Yes, please call me Dar'shun.
How you doing today, Lady D?
I am good. Just anticipating 2021, like I think a lot of people are. So just waiting these last couple of days.
Yeah, I think it will be a welcome change to see that stroke of midnight into 2021. A lot of folks will be excited about what the new year brings. And of course, speaking of which, there's this key piece of legislation that is actually, it goes beyond Georgia, and we'll get to that in a second. But there's a key piece of legislation that has been worked on and been introduced and reintroduced for quite some time that has to do with cannabis, right? And so we wanted to just get your take on what that legislation is, what it means, what are the prospects of it getting passed, and what are the implications. And so I know that's a lot to unpack, but go for it.
The legislation that's currently in Congress is nothing new to legalize marijuana. For the last several years that I've been elected, there's been a bill introduced to legalize marijuana, or at least make it so it's not as criminally bad for the amount of ounces that you have with marijuana. Of course, politics being as it is, we haven't had the right environment necessarily in the last few years to get something passed. I believe the particular bill you're speaking about has passed the House, but of course a lot of things are being stuck in the United States Senate right now, and with Georgia being the epicenter of 2 U.S. Senate seats,
right.
I don't see that moving before the next Congress gets sworn in, but it has been something that has been talked about with the federal government, and then obviously with states coming up with different types of legislation related to hemp and cannabis, which I know we're going to get to later, particularly here in Georgia. There's even more pressure on the federal government to deschedule marijuana from as a Schedule 1 drug and make it be able to be studied, because one of the things that restricts Schedule 1 drugs is you can't get grant money to study it, and some other things related to criminal justice reform. So it's there, and I think you just have to have the right timing, as you do with most things in politics, in order to get moved on.
Yes, there was a Forbes magazine article that talked about what you just alluded to, that they feel like the entire legalization of marijuana is contingent upon these Georgia races that are in a runoff for January 5th, that unless Democrats are elected, that there will be no chance to legalize marijuana. Do you think it's that extreme? Do you agree with that, what that article states?
I pretty much do. I mean, one of the big differences between the House and the Senate that some people know it, but they don't really internalize, is in the House of Representatives, the turnover rate is every 2 years. In the Senate, it's every 6 years. And so you only have 1/3 of the senators that are up every 2 years. And so when you have that much longevity of somebody being in elected office and believing what they believe, it really does have more lasting effects than it would if they just had 2-year terms. So I think that is, barring a miracle, that is about right.
That has come up with friends. And so, Lady D, from someone who has connections with cannabinoids and cannabinoids outside of Georgia. So a lot of people don't even know that there are only 6 states that still have a marijuana where it's still fully illegal. In this last election, the state of Mississippi had it to where if you have one of 22, and it was citizen backed, that if you had a citizen sponsored, that if you have one of 22 debilitating medical conditions, then you could have medical marijuana. What does it actually say, the initiative? And I also know there's an initiative in Arkansas that says something a little different, and there's some things. What does it actually say here in Georgia? What does the actual legislation say for those citizens in Georgia?
In Georgia, we have what's called cannabidiol oil that is a derivative, the cannabis plant.
Right. Psychoactive. Is non-psychoactive.
Right. It has a low amount of THC, I think 0.3% of THC. Above that, you start getting into all those psycho effects. And so I'm not very clear on the science of making it, but essentially it is the oil that is produced from a cannabis plant that has low amounts of THC, and you actually have to apply through the Department of Health for to be a card-carrying member of this oil.
And that's actually, you can get that card actually down the street from where we are now. You have to go. Yep.
Yeah, they have the process on the State Health Department website, and I think it covers 19 ailments here in the state of Georgia. That bill actually came through one of the committees that I served on, and you would not, maybe you could imagine the types of heated discussions we had surrounding that. But anyway, and so there is that cannabidiol oil that is being manufactured here in Georgia. And of course, we passed 2 years, or last year, maybe it was last year. This year has got my timeline.
It's a bit of a blur, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We passed licenses for manufacturing of cannabis, and there's 6 licenses currently available here in Georgia. In other states, they have 50 and 20, but Georgia obviously is a conservative state, so they started out with 6 licenses for manufacturing cannabis. And so, relatively speaking, we have come a long way, and all these changes have been championed by one Republican out of Macon. He no longer serves in the House with me, but he championed the medicinal use for a little girl named Haley.
Mm-hmm.
And the name of the law is colloquially called Haley's Law.
Haley's Law. And I think that was from a strain called Charlotte's Web. I think that's the one she used. I'm kind of familiar with that, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, we tend to, when we have a compelling story, name deals after people. So the medicinal marijuana cannabis oil deal is named Haley's Law, and it's a little girl who has seizures. She was about 6 or 7 at the time she testified before our committee, or a little younger. and she kept having seizures. And, we provided all these experts that said cannabidiol oil would essentially calm her down so she wouldn't have seizures.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's about, a 5 to 6 year campaign to where we are. So that's a little bit of the backstory for people.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because I'm more on the biochemical side of it. And like I said, that strain that I think that Haley uses is called Charlotte's Web. It's a particular strain which helps. The cannabidiol helps in seizures. It alleviates seizures, as well as there's some that they use also for people that may have some kind of what they say. I want to say that have had psychoanalysis and deal with some types of anxieties as well. But I do remember that particular politician out of Macon.
So what would you say to the people who have a fear of legalizing marijuana because of previous experience with the war on drugs? And I'm doing air quotes when I say that. Or how people of color, Black and brown people, have been disproportionately arrested for crimes related to marijuana versus other people. And they feel like, well, I'm not sure exactly how they feel, but just the general war on drugs gives people pause about legalizing marijuana. What would be your take on that?
Yeah, so I think my take would be the testimony that I heard when Georgia was going through all those changes. We heard from not only anecdotal sort of stories about the benefits of using marijuana and derivatives of marijuana, but also from our law enforcement community and our medical community. And, one of the questions, obviously, our law enforcement community, particularly here in Georgia, is opposed to any form of marijuana being legalized. But one of the questions that me and my colleagues on my side of the aisle were able to ask was, when you're writing tickets and GBI and law enforcement agencies have data on citations, how many people are cited for driving under the influence specifically of marijuana? And so, you hear about alcohol and you hear about, maybe taking too many prescription drugs, but they could not point to us a substantial number, or any number at all, actually, the number of citations that could be attributed to driving, while high, essentially. And so, one of the things that I try to tell people is, if you look at sort of the behaviors and the stories and things that we gathered in totality from those hearings, is that we are making a problem where there doesn't seem to be one, right? So we know driving under the influence of alcohol can be a problem for a number of reasons, but we haven't been able to pinpoint exactly where the pushback is to legalizing marijuana, because you can't even say, you're worried about people getting high and killing other people in accidents, because there is no data to support it. And, when you talk about Black and brown people being locked up, of course, we are the ones that are clearly being locked up for that. But particularly if Georgia wants to continue the legacy of the past governor and really wants to do substantive criminal justice reform, you have to look at these nonviolent offenders, and marijuana is going to be a big chunk of that, either as a user or either as having small amount possessions of marijuana. So when you're talking about just in general making marijuana more legal, even in a more controlled way, there is not much argument from opponents legalizing it that I have seen that really is a compelling reason for not opening, loosening the criminal justice side of it and opening up more of being able to use it for any variety of things. So that's the gist of what I have to say about it.
Okay, got it.
Okay. If you don't mind, besides being a representative for the state of Georgia, can you tell us, just in a quick sentence, I want to know if it's okay to tell the listeners what you do besides being a representative, because it plays into the next question that I have.
Well, I'm a corporate attorney, specifically a securities attorney. So I help companies when they're raising money with the compliance side. And I'm also a registered investment advisor here in Georgia.
Okay. And the reason why I wanted to say that is because I wanted everybody to know that you do have a degree in law. You are an attorney, even though you may not be a criminal lawyer or do it specifically in that, you do have law as your background. And so with that question, I want to ask you the difference between legality versus equity in this, because we're in Georgia moving towards talking about where they're allowing some farmers to grow hemp. However, the law in Georgia states that if you're caught with the plant, even though, like, for example, in Savannah, possession has been decriminalized, but if you're caught with the oil, with the CBD oil and with that, but if you're caught with the plant, if you don't have a state issued tax stamp on it, that is a felony. How do you see that? Is that more of a legal thing versus equity? Because it seems like from a equitable point of view or equity point of view, that doesn't seem fair. And so I wanted you to give me the legal answer on how you feel that or why they do it in that manner.
Yeah, well, part of that is the compromise process. It really, making a law really is a sausage making process. And so, believe it or not, that is a compromise piece in order to get enough votes to actually pass the bill. Because some people thought when this law passed, people would just the next day be growing marijuana out in their backyard and selling it on the street corner. And so that's sort of a compromise piece to to get the bill over the finish line. But the equity piece is interesting because Black and brown people or people that are locked up for these minor drug offenses related to marijuana are Black and brown people.
Right.
And so Georgia essentially a year or so ago created a $1 billion industry, that's billion with a B here in Georgia, related to marijuana and manufacturing cannabis. And they have neglected by, sheer just not want or no will to do a counter or a complementary bill that would exonerate, help expunge, help free Black and brown people who are locked up for the exact same thing of the industry that we just created.
Wow.
And so when you're talking about equity, they say essentially what they're saying is it's okay for people to make money off cannabis, but it is still illegal to, possess it in its raw form. And we know who that disproportionately affects. And so, I have always advocated that if we are going to make millionaires out of people who do not look like me from this new industry that we created, we have to, at the same time, can't be talking out the side of our mouths and keep locking up Black and brown people, but essentially doing the same thing. It's just you're not sanctioned by law to do it. And so that's the equity piece that is always back of my mind.
Right. But that is such a thing when you're talking about that. Like, people don't know, in order to get that, you have to have, for example, $20,000 just to bring to the table just for the application process. A lot of people don't understand that side of it. So you were talking about, and you talked about Governor Kemp signing into law in about around April of last year, of 2019, that HOPE Act. Can you kind of just tell the people just in a nutshell what the HOPE Act does?
Yeah, so the HOPE Act, what it does is that it it allows for a process by which you can be a manufacturer of cannabis. And so, like I said before, it's 6 licenses. A lot of states have a lot more. But in Georgia, it's 6 licenses divided into 2 tiers. And to your point, $20,000 is the least amount. It takes millions of dollars to even be able to be viable to get one of these licenses. And so it is allowing for people to enter into the cannabis industry for the purposes of manufacturing for medicinal purposes. And so it is going to make a lot of people rich overnight. And unfortunately, I have very few doubts that the people are going to look like us, even though there is a 20% minority contracting piece that's actually in the bill, which is the first time that's happened in the history of Georgia that we were actually able to put in something actually in the bill.
But there's a loophole to that, in my opinion. I've read that, and it's a loophole in that. If you have somebody just owning a business, doesn't matter who the shareholders are. If you have 51%, that's considered a minority business.
Right. And they're supposed to do some reporting that I think is coming up in 2022, where the commission is supposed to look at sort of where the license has been awarded and who subcontractors are and all of that. So that ought to be an interesting report and finding that they would have to make known. But, we're per usual, we're not only continuing to struggle for criminal justice reform so we don't get shot in the streets, but we're also trying to get a portion the economy that we help build. So
exactly.
It's the same old story.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic. I mean, I know that you have to go and you're such a busy woman with all the different pursuits that you have going on. So normally ICZ would handle this at the end of the interview and say, hey, in closing, is there anything else that you want to share? I know the legislative session is coming up in January. And so you're looking forward to that. You'll be even busier. But is there anything else you want to share with the listeners as we get ready to close out?
Yes, and you won't be surprised when I say that there is an important election coming up January the 5th. Make sure that you get out and vote. Georgia has never before been the epicenter of presidential race like it has this past year, which is why everybody's getting those text messages and phone calls if you're a super voter like me.
Yeah.
But it feels nice to be wanted. I will say that. And so I'm just excited about exercising my right to vote, and I hope everybody else does too.
Awesome.
Well, we got to have you back on because there's so much that we didn't even get to cover in this. We just wanted to give the 30s and specifically Georgia citizens a glimpse of the legal side. So we wanted to talk about the politics of Mary Jane. So we want to thank you, Representative Dar'shun Kendrick. I am the IZZ.
Mariposa here.
Thank you for joining us, Representative Kendrick.
Thank you for having me. Everybody have a safe holiday.
Yep, same to you. Happy New Year.
30-minute podcast, full topics, half an hour.
Until next time.
Thanks for joining us. It's our pleasure to have you listen to each and every episode. Please follow us on IG and YouTube. Drop a comment and let us know what you'd like us to talk about. And rate us. 5 stars means you love what you heard. Until next time.